Hello, hello, and welcome to the DoubleBlind Magic Hour, where we cover what's going on in the world of psychedelics, from insider baseball drama within the rapidly unfolding psychedelic movement to the latest news on research, politics, and beyond. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shelby Hartman, co-founder and editor-in-chief of DoubleBlind, a print magazine covering psychedelics, and today we're joined by Holly Regan, a journalist focused on telling stories at the intersection of culture, consciousness, and underrepresented communities. You can find their bylines in the New York Times, Vice, the Seattle Met, and of course DoubleBlind, among many others. Hey, Holly.
Hi, great to be here.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so I hope you don't mind me starting out by telling the story of how we met, because I think it's actually really interesting and gets to the heart of a lot of what you care about, which is about a year ago, I was reading Vice and I stumbled upon your story called Inside the Quest to Decolonize Psychedelics. And I just want to say that in the history of DoubleBlind, I had never before reached out cold to a writer, because I actually just know a lot of journalists. You know, I've been a journalist for a long time, and we also get a lot of pitches from journalists. But when I read the story, I was like, I need to know this person because firstly, it's well reported, but also I was like, this person is deep in the psychedelic space. Like the perspectives you were bringing to the table, the sources that you were quoting, you know, in a lot of mainstream media. I mean, this is changing more and more, but we see a lot of the same voices again and again, right? The same people who we've seen platformed at, you know, big conferences.
Sure.
And you were just really bringing a lot of nuance to a platform like Vice. And anyway, so I reached out to you and I was like, loved your piece, want to contribute, to which you said, maybe. And we basically had to go back and forth and engage in a really critical dialogue about, like, what is the point of DoubleBlind? What are our ethics? What are our values? Tell me more about kind of what was going through your head and why it was important for you to have that conversation with me before saying yes.
Yeah, no, and I appreciated then and still do now your willingness to engage in dialogue on that. I think a lot of editors would probably be like, okay, never mind. But yeah, I mean, it just, in the course of writing that story, especially, which was a very long process, and it was, you know, something I was kind of working on for a long time before it got picked up. I just really was becoming more and more aware of all the complicated dynamics, that are involved with people in this space and different communities and perspectives and lineages that are, you know, being represented in various ways. And it is very important to me to make sure whoever I'm working with is as in alignment as can be with, you know, various underrepresented groups that I'm representing. And I've always read DoubleBlind's articles. You know, I always enjoyed your stories, but I just kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about the backstory behind it. And I don't know how into that you want to get, but I really just kind of your response alone was a good proof to me of, you know, what kind of values you and the publication had. Just a real willingness to kind of be transparent and
Yeah, thank you so much. And I am an open book. And, you know, recently we did a summit on working in psychedelics, which was largely about, like, should you even work in psychedelics if you want to, and what are the ethical considerations? And Charlotte James, who we will have on this podcast at some point, gave a presentation on collective liberation. Mm-hmm. And, she basically said, every psychedelic company should have a statement on their website about their relationship to money. And so I just wrote something up. We're putting it live on the site. It might already be live on the site.
Oh, cool.
But I told you then what I'll say now, which is it is like nearly impossible to be in complete, it is impossible to be in complete value alignment when you're running an organization within a late stage capitalistic paradigm. Like, we have to make money to pay our writers so they can pay their rent. Like, we have to make money, like, and there's always going to be people that say, like, you should never make money when you're talking about anything related to psychedelics ever. And that's like, there's conversations to be had about that. But I'll just say that we're not perfect. We're here to have the hard conversations. I have made mistakes. I've tried to correct for those mistakes. I will make more. It's a really, really tricky time. And I think that part of why I want to just say this is because we've had, a fair amount of interviews now for this podcast where we talk about other companies and what they're doing. And I just want to say DoubleBlind isn't immune to having those same challenges.
Oh, sure. I mean, like, it's hard to just be a person in late stage capitalist consumer society and not be contributing to all the problems in some kind of way as well. Like, I'm not immune either as a writer. I mean, I've made mistakes. I've, had to walk back and, I try to live in alignment with my values as much of the time as possible, but like none of us are perfect in that. So I think as long as, like you said, we're willing to confront it and, admit it when we're wrong and just try to be better. That's all we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something that I also always want to encourage folks to do is to think about the fact that organizations, companies, the government, media, so to speak, is comprised of individual people. Because something that we hear about a lot, like there's a whole contingent of, well, we can argue about whether or not they are or aren't conspiracies, but there's a whole contingent of people within the psychedelic space who are hypercritical of institutional power. And there is a real reason for that. But I can also tell you as a journalist, like my whole career, I've heard people be like, the media. And I'm like, who's the media? Like, the media is a lot of different organizations with different values, different practices that are all comprised of individuals, including a lot of freelance writers who have nothing to do with what the organization is doing outside of publishing their article.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Like, we may not even be getting paid half the time. It's like, I definitely would not consider us like a part of any kind of hegemonic power whatsoever. So
I'm looking forward to getting into some of the stories that you have reported for DoubleBlind, but first we're going to take a quick break. So for those of you who don't know, DoubleBlind began as a print magazine, and it's still at the heart of what we do. I spent my whole career as a journalist before starting DoubleBlind, reporting on psychedelics, cannabis, and drug policy more broadly for Rolling Stone, Vice, LA Weekly, Quartz. I did just about everything in journalism. I worked at CBS News, covering breaking news, a major newspaper, small media startups, and if you haven't heard, journalism is in crisis. But we started DoubleBlind anyway because we believe in the value of good journalism to educate and hold stakeholders accountable. We saw what happened in cannabis. Pioneers who put their lives on the line to get patients access to the medicine they needed, getting left behind because they didn't have the capital to compete in the newly regulated market. We've seen what's happened in mental health care and healthcare more broadly, whereby millions of people are suffering, don't trust their doctors, can't afford proper care, and just don't know what to do to get well. In our print magazine, we feature essays, investigations, photojournalism, and much more by world-class journalists who are going everywhere from the ayahuasca tourism industry in Peru to laboratories at leading universities. We're supporting people like you on their journey with psychedelics, and we're covering this movement as it unfolds. This is all made possible by our members who, in exchange for their support, get direct access to psychedelic experts to help them on their journeys of healing and growth, workshops, and a subscription to our beautiful print magazine. Subscribe today at doubleblindmag.com/membership. Did you know that there is one phase of sleep that almost everyone fails to get enough of? And this one phase of sleep is responsible for most of your body's daily rejuvenation, repair, controlling hunger and weight loss hormones, boosting energy, and so much more? I'm talking about deep sleep. And if you don't get enough, you'll probably struggle with cravings, slow metabolism, premature aging, or even worse conditions. Why don't most people get enough of this one most important phase of sleep? A big reason is magnesium deficiency, because over 80% of the population is deficient in magnesium. And magnesium increases GABA, which encourages relaxation on a cellular level, which is critical for sleep. Magnesium also plays a key role in regulating your body's stress response system. Those with magnesium deficiency usually have higher stress levels, which negatively impacts sleep as well. Now, before you go out and buy a magnesium supplement, it's important to understand that most products out there only have 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, when the reality is your body needs all 7 forms of this essential sleep mineral. That's what makes Magnesium Breakthrough by Optimizers unique. Magnesium Breakthrough contains all 7 forms of magnesium designed to help calm your mind and help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. For an exclusive offer, go to buyoptimizers.com/doubleblind and use promo code DoubleBlind during checkout to save 10%. Okay, so first up, I'd like to talk about a story that you reported for us on DMTX, which is basically a technology that infuses DMT via IV, like anesthesia, and extends the DMT experience. This is a really fascinating, weird story. So people may or may not know that DMT was famously called the businessman's trip, which is problematic. I know we're not going to get into that now, but that's because unlike other classic psychedelics like shrooms and LSD, which both take half a day or longer, DMT typically lasts about 15 minutes. And there's been studies conducted with DMTX since 2021, and they're not only trying to understand how DMT works, but the researchers hypothesize that this work might also help us understand the nature of consciousness and even reality itself. Yes, you heard me right. So, Holly, tell me more about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating technology, and it is a technology which, one of the sources, Andrew Gallimore, talks about in the story. Gallimore and Rick Strassman, legendary psychedelic researcher, kind of came up with the methods for delivering DMT in this way in a paper. I think it was in 2016. And it's kind of just been getting tested and refined over the years. And there are 2 groups. I mean, there's now starting to be like a few more people here and there who have used the technology, but kind of the main groups that I focused on are Imperial College London, well known in psychedelic research. They have been doing a series of studies, first with just kind of regular smoked maybe it was intravenous DMT, and then now DMTX, and the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness in Boulder, Colorado. They have also, now launched a successful mission of their own, and it's really fascinating. I mean, basically, like the way that they're thinking it can shed some light on, these other very complex aspects of the human experience, is that the same brainwave patterns, they kind of observe some of the same behavior when you're dreaming, when you're dying, and when you are smoking or consuming DMT in some way. So,
DMT is endogenous. It's something that already exists in the brain and is released during certain naturally occurring experiences, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's in basically every living thing on, it's in plants, trees, animals. So it's like Gallimore also talks about it being kind of like seems like it's this key that nature has put there for us that unlocks kind of some mystery, because it's everywhere and it's a super simple molecule, and yet it's like the most complex, like phenomenological experience that, that one of the most that exists. So,
Yeah, I mean, so I studied philosophy as an undergrad, much to the chagrin of my parents. I got into the journalism school and I was like, I'm going to study philosophy. It's more interesting. And
I support that.
and for any and for anyone who has studied philosophy, you know that humans have been trying to figure out the nature of consciousness for at least several millennia.
Sure.
And I know that this is something you are especially interested in your reporting. So my question to you would be, is DMTX the answer?
Oh, I mean, that's above my pay grade to answer. But it certainly, I mean, I certainly think it seems like a key to something as well. And it's also like a part of the active chemical constituency of psilocybin. Like it really does seem to be part of some greater mystery hiding in plain sight. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of fascinating angles with the DMTX experience as well that kind of, we can go there, that like focuses a lot on the entities and interactions with entities. But I think even outside of that, yeah, the fact that, I don't know, there's research talking about the DMT could be an ancient neurotransmitter. And like Gallimore has a paper where he talks about, that it's kind of like the nighttime neurotransmitter to serotonin as the daytime neurotransmitter, and talks about kind of this theory that like maybe at one point like human brains operated in the day world using serotonin, and that was the model built of the world. That's the one that you and I are interacting with right now, that most of us interact with in our daily waking life, and that at nighttime then maybe we switched into this like DMT model instead. And the reason that we can enter into this complete like world replacement, as happens with DMT, is that in order for you to experience something happening, like your brain has to have some prior experience of that, right? Because everything is essentially a model that we're experiencing right now. It's like your brain is running a program, and so like where did the program come from? So there's so many, I could go down 100 rabbit holes of it. It's like,
I want to go down the rabbit holes. Let's go down them. One rabbit hole. Well, firstly, before we go down the entity rabbit hole, which I'd really like to go down with you, I just want to say that for folks who don't know, as Holly mentioned, Imperial College London is one of the academic institutions that has been doing a significant amount of psychedelic research and is sort of credited with legitimizing psychedelics as a potential medicine and therapeutic context ivalongside NYU and Johns Hopkins. And in London is a very prestigious institution. I mean, it's kind of considered like an Ivy League, the way Ivy Leagues are considered in the United States. So they have done studies looking at, say, like psilocybin for depression, which is, being put through the FDA approval process right now. The fact that they are doing studies with the intention of communicating with entities and understanding the nature of reality with DMT, I mean, that in and of itself is like wild to me. Like, how did they even get funding for something like that?
That I don't know actually, but yeah, I mean, it continually amazes me. Like they have a whole like division that is focused on DMT research specifically, like
right.
Chris
and we're not
Timmerman
talking about DMT
yeah.
research, really. Like we hear about psilocybin, we hear about MDMA, but
right.
The only DMT research we really hear about is the research that Rick Strassman did in, I think, the 90s in New Mexico. I mean, we don't hear about DMT research happening now.
Right. And it's like the most fascinating, like phenomenological experience that we have. So the fact that it's not, that it's not being studied more, or if it is, it's not being talked about, like that is wild. There could be a lot of reasons for that I can think of. But yeah, Leave it to someone who's not America to be doing it.
So. Right. I mean, I also just think from a purely, I mean, this again is probably, beyond your scope and would be a question for like, I don't know, an investor, researcher, or both. But, just from a purely financial perspective, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more DMT for therapy research, because of the fact that the most expensive part of the psychedelic therapy is actually not the drugs. It's the therapist, and the fact that if you do psilocybin, you need someone sitting with you for 4 to 6 to 8 hours, right? Whereas DMT, in theory, you can have an experience that is incredibly profound and is over in 15 minutes.
True, though I think, in my experience and the experience of other people I've talked to, because it is so brief, I think it's kind of hard to tackle more of the psychological, emotional issues. I'm trying to not go down a million rabbit holes, but that's part of the interest with DMTX as well. The Daniel McQueen at Center for Medicinal Mindfulness talked about in our interviews, was, because you can stay in longer, because you can actually like adjust to the environment. Like that's one of the most interesting parts about it, right? Is like with other methods of ingesting DMT, it's like you're in complete shock. You're plunged into this world, and it kind of like by the, as soon as you've started to like adjust to what's going on, you're already kind of coming out of it. Mm-hmm. So this method, people are fully, cognizant, and they're able to like communicate in real time. This is all reportedly, but I've been told they're able to communicate in real time with people who are facilitating. They can almost like kind of switch between realities in a way, and they're, returning to the same spaces, meeting the same entities over and over, like actually working through, like Alexander Biner is another one of the sources I spoke to, who's a participant in the Imperial trials and founded Breaking Convention. He talked about like that one of the entities he spoke with actually was like, hey buddy, like before you can understand the nature of reality, you have to like look at your relationship problems. And so like had to kind of confront some personal stuff that way. But like you're not gonna be able to do that, with a shorter method of administration.
Hey buddy, you're not ready to understand the nature of reality.
Right.
So let's go down this DMT entities rabbit hole. So as you sort of referenced, part of the intention behind the DMTX work is that people report encountering similar entities in the DMT space. Now, some people refer to them as aliens. Well, some people refer to them as machine elves. People have tried to make art of these aliens and machine elves. It seems like a lot of people are seeing things and encountering entities that are similar. And so there's this idea that, if you can hang out in the sort of DMT realms longer, that you can familiarize yourself in a deeper way with these entities and cultivate relationships with them and ask them questions and bring that information back, which to me is just so interesting for a lot of reasons. But one of them is that this is under the assumption that like the entities are real, or that the information that they have to give people is valuable in some way in this dimension of reality that we normally live in, right? Which we don't even have, robust amounts of science showing that. And it's very controversial. So sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but I just have to say, because I think you'll find it interesting. We had Zeus Tapato, who's a journalist and studying neuroscience, write an op-ed for DoubleBlind called "No, DMT Aliens Aren't Real." And I kid you not, we have never, not with anything related to social justice, corporadelics, lots of other tender topics, had so many people up in arms about an article. We had hundreds of people unfollow us on Instagram because they were so upset that we would publish a journalist saying that DMT aliens aren't real.
That's wild. I appreciate that. There isn't any way right now really to prove or disprove that claim, right? So, I mean, like, Andrew Gallimore did talk about in our interview, wanting to do some kind of ontological testing and try to get at this idea of whether they are like real or not. But it's like, what does that even
they're
mean?
putting quotes in the air for those of you not watching on YouTube, listening to the audio version.
Yeah, like what does real even mean? And in this space especially, but I don't know. I was just reading a paper earlier this morning about kind of how there is no such thing as objectivity. So it's like, what are we even talking about? But yeah, to try to like ask them questions that only like you would know the answer to, kind of like doing some kind of testing, but that's not been part of any of the trials or anything. And yeah, I mean, like some of the sources I spoke to, and like I kind of, well, before I'll say what they said first. Like some of the sources I spoke to, they're kind of like, well, it almost doesn't matter if they're real or not, if you're getting benefit for your life, if you're working through issues, if it's helping us like be better humans. But I will say one thing that was super wild that Daniel McQueen talked about at Center for Medicinal Mindfulness. He said that some of their communications with the entities, they were telling them how to improve the technology they were using and the method of administration. They were literally giving them like adjustments, like technical adjustments to the equipment to like help the infusion, helps that. I don't know the technical terminology, but like to help.
Did it work?
The process. Yeah. Like they got specific like calculations that they applied and it worked better. So.
Wow. I mean, something I want to bring in here because I know it's an important part of your reporting and is also an important commitment that DoubleBlind has made is to incorporate Indigenous perspectives and Indigenous ways of knowing into our storytelling. And so, for folks who are listening to this and going, oh my God, they're talking about DMT aliens and whether they're real. This is way too far out for me, and this is not grounded in any reality or any legitimate perspectives at all. I just want to share, and then I'll let you share, of course, as well, some of what you wrote about in the story, that every Indigenous cosmology that I am aware of is infused with this idea of animism, and this, which is essentially that everything has a spirit. All the plants, all the fungi, all the animals, and that, with cultivation of a practice with certain plant medicines, that you can communicate with the spirits of these plants and these fungi. And it's not about you're ingesting a substance. It's about building a relationship with the spirit of the animate being that you are deciding to enter into a relationship with. And so, with DMT, it's tricky because with DMTX, because I think it brings up a lot of interesting questions around, do synthetics or do psychedelics that have been tweaked or altered in some way by humans, do they preserve that same sort of spirit or that same sort of animistic quality that, say, like a medicine that has been taken for thousands of years by an indigenous community like peyote or ayahuasca would? But we can say for sure that for thousands of years that, indigenous communities have taken plant medicines and engaged in relationships with them and had conversations with them and lended credence to the messages that they received in those realms. And that what's happening here with DMTX is similar in some ways.
I have so many things to say. I can't say them all. Yeah, no, I mean, completely. Like, I guess one thing I wanted to add first off is, yeah, like the more I am learning, deepening in my own studies and practice, that it's in, a lot of these kind of traditional cosmologies, it's even more than animism. It's not just everything has a spirit, everything is alive. It's like, uh, there is only one thing, and we are all it and different. We are just all different manifestations of the same thing. So it's um, like I'm taking this course called Queer Ecology through Advaya right now, and the professor was just talking the other day about this concept of like in the global north, we have symbols for things, and it's like, oh, the bear is a symbol of our people or whatever, and that's actually like not really how it's perceived in a lot of these cosmologies. It's we are the bear. Like it's not that, yeah. And so we may have like, oh, the American bald eagle is a representation of our country, but it would be like, no, like we are these animals, we are these plants. And I mean, that's been my personal experience with journeys that I've had, and in sitting with people from indigenous lineages and being led through their traditional practices and educated on their um, their belief system. This Nothing else has ever resonated as truly for me as this. So in that essence, it's like, we have this conception of, oh, there's aliens, they're things that are like people, but they live somewhere else and they come down from space, and like
they're green. They're in a silver. They're in a silver shuttle.
Sure, like they're gray with long heads and whatever. Yeah, it's like, and like, what is the concept? Like, even the word alien is just basically like something that's not yourself.
Yeah, there's just too much cultural baggage attached to the word alien.
Yeah, and it kind of gives this whole, and like, I'll be real, before I personally worked with DMT, I had a lot of opinions about it that were like, that shit's crazy. You're going to go talk to aliens. Like, that's not real. Like, I had a whole bias about a lot of things in the past, that I have been proven wrong through direct experience. But I mean, yeah, and wrong. What does that even mean? But yeah, I mean, my experience and the experience of these other people who, come from these lineages is that it's really just, as you said, like the plants, the medicines, they're portals. They're just opening. It's removing filters. Like we have the concept in the global north of like, I take the thing, I add something to myself, and this makes me have this experience. And in these worldviews and non-dual worldviews, it's subtraction. It's I take off layers and it's showing me what's actually always here all the time. But we, as humans with bodies and cultures and all kinds of layers of conceptions of various kinds, like those things help us navigate with the model that uses serotonin through the world, but that's not the fundamental nature of reality. So,
yeah. And this isn't, I mean, there have been Western philosophers who have also spoken about the idea of different realities and, is what we're perceiving and on a day-to-day basis really reality, or there are two dimensions of reality, like Kant famously talked about the noumena and the phenomena, right? So, this idea of there are things that exist that we cannot see and feel in our day-to-day lives is not actually as far out as it might seem when we're talking about things like DMT and aliens.
Sure. And like one fascinating thing, like I learned in the course of researching this story is, there's theories that DMT is just sort of like this gateway to the collective unconscious that Carl Jung talked about, and it's the same kind of like a different language for the same thing we were just talking about with some, with non-dual thinking as well. That's kind of like, we're everyone. And like, but that maybe the DMT space is this collective unconscious realm where you're interacting with archetypes, right? And so the different energies and the symbols that supposedly are universal across cultures. And yeah, if that's the case, then who's to say that it doesn't extend to cultures in other dimensions too? Like the collective unconscious could be pretty big. If we're talking about like the whole of existence. And yeah, I mean, I even read a paper that was kind of about the collective unconscious as being like the quantum sea, and yeah, that's going to get into a whole rabbit hole though. So like, there's plenty of routes, I think, to kind of get at the same phenomenon. And that's sort of what's cool about DMTX. Like Gallimore talked in our interview about how like it's a technology, just like ayahuasca is a technology. Like ayahuasca is not a plant. It is a combination of plants that people put together to unlock, this portal. And that's essentially the same thing the DMTX is just using like medical technology, but it's just a different kind of route to get at the same thing. And Carl Smith, who is one of the sources for the story and who also is a participant in the Imperial trials, like he's doing some really amazing research of his own as well, like with the pyramids in Egypt, and kind of exploring how even at different frequencies of sound can like trigger some of these same brain waves that we're seeing with death, dreaming, DMT, that these are there's all kinds of different technologies that are very, very ancient. And this has always been something humans have been fascinated by. And it seems that maybe in the past we like knew more about it than, than we've forgotten. And
right. Yeah. I mean, that's a theme that comes up again and again on this
sure.
podcast and in my reporting, is this idea that we're not necessarily realizing or discovering as much as we might be remembering what we have forgotten.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. There's a lot more to talk about here.
I know. I could go on.
I know. We go on and on and on down all the rabbit holes. But I want to make sure we have time to get to our trip tips, everyone's favorite part of the show. Just as always, want to provide a disclaimer. We're not doctors. We're not psychiatrists. We are journalists. We've heard from a lot of folks in our community who are queer and have been partying for a long time and doing psychedelics in a more quote unquote recreational context, that they now want to move to having a more intentional relationship with plant medicines. And I know that a lot of queer community is sort of birthed on the dance floor and, at raves, and that, when folks who are queer want to make a transition to sort of like a more mindful life and start going to bed earlier and taking better care of their bodies, they're not really sure where to look. So I thought this would be a good question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I personally I only got in touch with my queer and trans identities as a result of working intentionally with plant medicine. So, and not just plant medicine, of, other medicines. So that, I think it's a very rich area for exploration. I mean, I think the most important thing is probably to me, I think preparation and integration is always like super key, and to have someone that you're working with that you can talk through your experiences with, I think is like the most important, like someone who is in the queer or trans community or however under the rainbow umbrella, is most aligned with you. I think obviously like support during the experience in the beginning is important as well, to have like a facilitator who you trust, again, I think, who's literate uh I use it queer as an umbrella term to mean like LGBTQIA plus, everyone in our family. Um, but yeah, I think having, if you're going to sit with a facilitator, having someone who is conversant is important, because like being misgendered during a psychedelic experience, for example, could be like very triggering and upsetting. Um, so yeah, just really like turning to the community, having a clear intention before each journey, and kind of overarching for the whole work. To me, having like, a spiritual, philosophical, cosmological framework, has also been a very important part of my journey. That doesn't have to be for everyone. Um, but yeah, just really like having, other people you can talk to who have been there before is very helpful. But really, I think the most important is working with someone who, yeah, can help you with preparation and integration to set you up for success. Help you find the medicine that's right for you, because there's different ones, right? And like people can have very, very different reactions to those. And finding the right approach for you is important. And yeah, just really guidance on what might come up during the experience as well, and kind of being able to have someone you can talk through that with, either in real time or afterwards, or ideally both, that can help you contextualize what's happening. And part of realizing that like, oh, something that's scary or challenging isn't necessarily bad, right? Like I don't know how much I buy into whether there's actually bad trips or not, but that some of these things that are going to be very confronting are probably going to come up, especially on a journey where you're really questioning kind of your whole identity. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I reported a story a while back on some homophobia within the psychedelic community, specifically within underground ayahuasca circles. It's not always intentional, but there's a lot of languaging in kind of new age psychedelic circles around like brother, sister, or
Sure.
like the divine feminine, the divine masculine. We could have a philosophical conversation around whether those are or not useful concepts,
Mhm.
but it can feel sort of exclusionary for folks who might not fit perfectly into the category of like man or woman,
Sure.
which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there are a growing number of underground circles and also retreats that are specifically catering to the LGBTQIA plus community. The Temple of the Way of Light did a retreat
Oh,
not long
I
ago.
went to that. I wrote
Oh, you
about
did?
it. Yeah, I have
Oh,
a whole
okay.
feature that I wrote about it. But yeah,
Okay, yeah. Well, I think they're
I was
fantastic. I
at
don't.
their yeah, I was at their first one in 2022, the first one they
Okay,
ever
yeah.
did. So
So I think they're great. I've been there.
yeah,
And as always, you just want to be critical about where you go. Just because someone is saying that they're doing a queer ayahuasca circle doesn't mean that it's the right fit for you, doesn't mean that it's a safe space. I mean, unfortunately, we know that like even within the queer community, there's,
well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I was
like
gonna say. Like
yeah, like
as a
just
trans
because yeah, just
person,
exactly, like it's
I've
not
been in queer
necessarily going to be
spaces.
trans inclusive. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily going to be inclusive of, people of color. There's a lot of like issues around like racial inclusivity within
sure.
psychedelic spaces, and so
Yeah,
just being critical, but
yeah. And I mean, at the temple, we had those discussions with the maestros and maestras as well. Of like, we have people in our circle here who are not men, not women. And, we like had to kind of confront that as a group, and everyone was very open, and the discussions I thought were helpful and productive. But yeah, I mean, even in that space, there were challenging things that were coming up on how to approach those issues. So
yeah, but we've reported a lot of stories of or published a lot of stories of queer folks that have had transformative psychedelic experiences that have helped them feel uh, safer in their bodies
Sure.
and really help them kind of come into their understanding of who they are and to claim who they are. And so there's seemingly a lot of potential there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've personally experienced that myself, and I have other friends who have had that experience as well. And I mean, one other thing that I would really highly encourage people to do, like I'm part of a integration circle that's for, I mean, there are queer ones as well. I'm part of one that's for trans and non-binary people. And we meet virtually once a month, and we have a chat that we all are in. And that has probably been like my number one best
Can you
resource.
share, like, if people want to find that circle, or is it a private?
I will need to ask about that. It
Okay,
is like other people can join it. I don't
we'll
know.
put
Yeah.
some, yeah. So we'll put some resources in the show notes for folks if they're looking for community, or they have a friend that's looking for community.
I have actually, I quoted someone from the group in another story I wrote. I just remembered. So, yeah, it's called Psychedelic. And yeah, you do have to be a bit careful with like contact information and things like that, because
Of
sometimes
course,
people who
of
are
course.
trolls get on to the meetings. And yeah,
Of
but
course,
but
of
that is a resource that we can provide information for people who
Mhm.
want to know more, because that's been the biggest thing for me, just having other people who are going through it with you and who you can process your experiences with, especially if you aren't someone that can afford like a regular therapist, which a lot of people in the community can't. Yeah.
So folks, if you want the chance for us to answer your questions on the Double Blind Magic Hour, you can email us at magichour@doubleblindmag.com. Holly, is there anything else that you'd like to share at this moment? And if not, just where folks can find you.
Um, well, I don't know if it's in the scope of our conversation, but like, yeah, I am kind of embarking on a bit of a new path with starting a creative research PhD program in the fall. So I will probably be less of a presence in the journalistic space, but more of a presence perhaps in the artistic space and other avenues. But definitely not leaving, but the practice is growing wider to encompass more. And yeah, I'm excited to do that. That's through the Trans Art Institute for Creative Research, and it's like a remote program that's transdisciplinary. So it's a very good fit for everything that I've been working on already. But yeah, people can find me on Instagram at Holly Regan Writes, and my website is thequeerbard.com. And I have a Substack newsletter as well, that's called The Both Between. So it's bothbetween.substack.com. And people can follow me in all of those places. And I will be chronicling kind of these new directions and expansions, and yeah, more about the journey.
Best of luck on your journey. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Oh, what a cool conversation. I was totally geeking out in that first part, the part of me that studied philosophy in school and is just so interested in these questions of consciousness. I think that one of the most interesting things to me about psychedelic research is not just the potential that psychedelics are showing as a mental health treatment, but also the fact that psychedelics are bringing conversations like the nature of consciousness, the nature of reality, mysticism into sort of Western academic institutions in a new way. And we know that, for many generations that, sort of the realms of religion and science have been considered separate. And it's not so easy to maintain that dichotomy when we start talking about psychedelics, right? Because even if someone goes into a clinical trial with the intention of healing such and such indication as it is described in the DSM, which is, that's kind of the American Psychological Association's Bible for diagnoses, They might have a mystical experience. They might start to question the nature of their reality. So there's a lot more to be said there. And I look forward to seeing how all of this unfolds and what kinds of conversations start cropping up that historically haven't within the Western medical community as a result of the quote unquote psychedelic renaissance. Thank you so much to everyone for listening. We really appreciate your support, time, and attention. If you want to read some of our incredible journalism, including Holly's pieces on the fascinating world of psychedelics, or get your tripping questions answered, we have so many free articles on our website, doubleblindmag.com. We work with absolutely amazing journalists and photographers who travel all around the world interviewing Indigenous stewards of plant medicines, researchers, therapists, politicians, and it's all made possible with the support of our membership, which comes with a subscription to our beautiful print magazine, which comes out twice a year, access to a private community of psychedelic lovers, workshops with psychedelic experts, and discounts to our classes where we teach you how to grow mushrooms and how to microdose. You can give our membership a try for 1 month for free if you want. You can come hang out with us, see what it's all about. Just visit doubleblindmag.com/membership. We'll also include that information in the show notes. If you have thoughts about what we talked about today, you have suggestions about who should come on in the future, there are so many ways to hit us up. You can email us at magichour@doubleblindmag.com or visit doubleblindmag.com/magichour. If you want to partner with us and help make this podcast possible, you can email partnerships@doubleblindmag.com and mention that you heard about it here for 10% off 3 months of advertising. And I just want to say that we only partner with brands we believe in and who align with our values. So if you hit us up, we're going to want to have a conversation with you about what you're all about. But we do offer limited advertising on this podcast, in the magazine, and elsewhere. You can find us on all the social platforms at DoubleBlindMag. I also want to give a shout out to the amazing folks at Human Content who are producing this podcast and helping make it possible. They do a lot of great podcasts other than this one. So if you're into podcasts, you can check them out on Instagram and TikTok at Human Content Pods. I want to thank you to everyone who has been leaving feedback and awesome reviews. If you subscribe, comment on your favorite podcasting app, follow, like, share with your friends, etc. It really, really helps us out. So we would just be eternally grateful if you would take a moment to do that. You can find full episodes up every week on YouTube at DoubleBlind. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Shelby Hartman. Special thanks to our guest, Holly Regan. Our executive producers are Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, Shanti Brooke, and Alex Field from the DoubleBlind team, who also edits the show. Our engineer is Jason Portizo. Our music is by Oma. To learn about our DoubleBlind Magic Hour program disclaimer and ethics policy and submission verification and licensing terms, you can go to doubleblindmag.com/magic hour. Now let's take you out on Atman Kama by Masood Ali Khan. Thanks for watching. And if you're thinking, gosh, I really need more Double Blind Magic Hour in my life, well, you can start listening now by clicking on that playlist button right over there. New episodes are out every Monday, so please subscribe and join us each week on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.